Three witches.
Oh, actually, Harry's not here today. So
It's only two of us.
there's only two. We may have to skip that little bit of throw away our garb, our witch's garb. It's freezing. Just keep myself warm. But yes, we are the, as you know, the three witches in other form. And I was just saying to Michaela that, witches are no longer hags. They're really very beautiful these days. So we're just embodying that, right, Michaela? Yes. And
Why are we embodying witches today, Bronwen? What's up with that?
well, there's this whole thing about a lot of people use the word magic with Reiki and, double well in trouble making magical stuff as witches. I mean, I think women are renowned as being witches. And as we know, more than 80% of Reiki practitioners are women. So it's a bit of a cauldron of witches, if you like, in the system of Reiki. And well, we're going to have a little chat today about what it means to be magical, what it means to have Reiki as magic. What am I doing? There we go. And to have Reiki as magic. And uh, what does that mean? I don't know. You've already got rid of your witch's garb, but tell me, Michaela, what does
Yeah. Well, I got rid of my sparkly witchy shawl because it's 108 degrees today, but I've certainly not gotten rid of my witchiness. I actually do identify as a witch. Um, and I definitely identify with the idea of magic. But I think that magic, like witch, like, even Reiki in some senses, is one of these words that mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And gets thrown around and used, fairly colloquially and casually oftentimes. But it does have very specific meanings, right? For different people and different cultures and different times and places, and for us individually. So it's a really fun topic, I think, to get into and to lay alongside the practice of Reiki. And it's one that we've touched on in other episodes that are kind of particularly coming to mind that we'll perhaps circle back on. And it's interesting, the way that synchronicities work. I was recording an interview for my YouTube series, Reiki Crossroads and Connections, which is very similar to interview style podcast. And the person I was interviewing also talks about, very explicitly talks about magic and how he does his work. So we had a good conversation about, well, what does that mean? What is magic to you? So, I think I'd love to start with just how do each of us define that word? And for you, dear listener at home, I invite you to just take a pause and ask yourself, well, what does magic actually mean to me? Whether or not you believe in it, whether or not you think that's a real phenomenon, but just really sitting with that question, what is magic?
Mhm.
And I think for me, when I think about that question, I probably answer it differently a little bit each time, but it really always roots back into the phenomena of this world that are in the realm of the unseen. Um, Things that we can experience with some of our senses, or maybe all of our senses all at once, that we don't necessarily have a concrete explanation for or definition for, or that really seems to be a intersection of a lot of different things happening in the world. For me, I look into the natural world and I see magic everywhere. I dig my compost heap and watch like eggshells and like leaves and garbage from my kitchen turning back into soil, and I'm like, that is magic. The processes that make that happen, that make the cycle of life turn and function in such complexity over such immense amount of time, and that happen in ways that we can't see, we can't always detect, and in ways that we can't possibly fully comprehend. To me, that all is in the realm of magic. And in looking at it that way, magic for me is not incompatible with a scientific inquiry of the world. In fact, to me, it's just two different ways of asking the question, what is happening and why. in a way that's perhaps a little bit more sparkly, but not necessarily. There's some pretty sparkly things that happen in science as well. So, yeah, so for me, again, that definition will shift and flex depending on the day and what's happening. But for me, it's really that alchemy of the many seen and unseen phenomena and processes that make the web of life work and which we are a part of and can experience in a variety of ways. And of course, practicing the system of Reiki quite possibly could be one of them. So, what comes up for you, Bronwyn? What to you is magic?
Well, to begin with, I actually have my familiar here with me. So this is Muttley,
Oh,
and he's my
hi,
magic.
Mark.
That was Muttley, and he is very magical, and he shouldn't be up here, and I'm going to try to ignore him now. You good boy, sit down next to the heater, enjoy the warmth. So, what is magic? Magic is something that, I don't know, you just said as you introduced it, what did I write down? Does it have to be something you believe in? I thought that was really interesting. And at first I was like, no, it doesn't. But then, yes, I thought it does actually, because it's all about how we perceive the world, right? So, how I perceive things, I can perceive the world as this amazing, magical world, or I could perceive it as very dull and drab. So it is very much through my own eyes. And if I could recite more Shakespeare, I would, because he says a lot. And yeah, so I think definitely how we see the world, our openness to the world, and magic, really, it's just a word. And it's a word that we can use in whatever way we want. And as you were saying, Michaela, within the system of Reiki, it can be used. It can be used as a lie. It can be used as a falsity, and it can be used to do things that might be inappropriate, I think. And that's when it's used to give someone power over someone else, to give them some sense that they know something or can do something that someone else can't do. And magic is not relative. It is something that is your own world. And that's why that word believe, it's about us. It's not about anyone else. And how I perceive and see the world is magical. I think that, the things that you just mentioned, like the compost heap or whatever, science is nature, right? And so we're not, as you say, it's in no way an anti-science perspective. If anything, it's like delving deeper into the mysteries and magic of our natural world, and how that exists and how we sit within it. So, yeah, I believe in magic, and in my world, in my own world, and uh, it's all about how I see things. So when I was saying about being open, um, I couldn't. I can see coincidences. I can see synchronicity. I can see. Uh, I can see I saw the other day there was this thing about elephants, and they were saying that, I don't know, maybe we were talking about this, but elephants. The article said that elephants do call each other by names. They worked out with artificial intelligence that they could listen to them and that they had certain names for each other. Now, I don't understand why that has to be magical. But to some people in the world, that is, of course, it makes sense. I mean, how the hell do they, they can differentiate between each other. I mean, this is this whole thing. Like, we can imagine, for example, that the animal world is also this very drab, neutral world, but in reality there's all this stuff that goes on, and we need to be able to open ourselves to that and be non-judgmental about all the beings and life, and really just be in it and take it for what it is. And when we do, that is magical.
I love how you're emphasizing the relationship of kind of our perception and our beliefs to whether or not we experience the world as magical. Because we can experience and observe the same phenomena and come to the conclusion that the world is full of magic, and therefore I am full of magic. And therefore I'm going to see it happen more often. I'm going to see those synchronicities that are just happening all the time. And I'm going to be more likely to respond to those synchronicities in a way that has meaning for me and is going to make my life feel more magical and might have actual tangible outcomes and benefits in my life. Or I can see the phenomenon of the world and I can say that can be logically explained by some, process, and therefore there isn't this meaningfulness. And it's the same phenomenon, right? But how we relate to it does in fact have an impact on how we live our life. And we can see that in mythology. We can see that in the stories that we tell. There's two examples that came up. I recently took a class about tracking our ancestry through the lens of music and myth. So like studying the music and the myth of a particular part of the world that has some connection to our ancestry. And the ways in which, inside of any myth, no matter how fantastical, how full of totally illogical, magical, impossible things, there's always seeds of truth. There's always seeds of direct observation of the world. And she gave this amazing example of mythology in a particular region around a lake that could spit balls of fire. There's all these stories about, imagining what magical creature lives in that lake that's spitting fire, and what are the phenomenon that come together, and what does it mean, and is it a fortune telling, and all of, just layers and layers and layers of myth and story and song around this lake that supposedly could shoot balls of fire. And in researching this region and this group of stories, researchers did in fact find this lake that was actually more of a bog, and it had some sort of sulfuric like rotting, when like gases are created through processes, and every once in a while, sure enough, a fireball would pop up out of this lake because of the natural scientific process of decomposition happening in a way that created these gases. And so you could look at that and say, oh, well, that phenomenon is explained. All of that mythology is meaningless. Or you could say it's real. Like that lake is magical. There is this like incredible, unique thing that is happening there. And isn't it fantastic that we can like understand it, but also have this whimsical, imaginal relationship to it? And that has everything to do with how we experience the world. The last few weeks, I've attended several funerals. It's been an intense bit of time. And this last one in particular, I had a good friend staying with me who had come down to attend the funeral with me. And just in the few days that we were together, we were experiencing one synchronicity after the next, just, from very mundane things that could easily be brushed off as happenstance, like those things just happen to be synchronous with each other, no big deal, to, really quite eerie moments of synchronicity between the two of us, and just in the midst of this experience, including things happening in the funeral itself. And again, you could look at that as coincidence. Wow, isn't that a little weird that so many of these moments of synchronicity happened? Or be like me and my witch friend and start tracking the pattern of those things. And when we did that, there were certain messages that we could discern, through our own lens, right? Somebody else might come to different meaning, right? But we're making our own meaning of what we're observing in these synchronicities, and like breadcrumbs, following them. And as a result of that, we decided to collaborate on some offerings, some magical things. And she's going to come back from North Carolina in a few months, and we're going to, do some things together. And again, you could look at that very mechanically. Oh, two friends got together, they had an intense experience, they decided to do a thing. Or you could be in the mystery of it and say, we came together because of this really intense situation. We were so present with each other in the intensity of that situation. And because we both have practices like the system of Reiki, she has different practices, but very similar outcomes. that helped us to stay present in that really difficult time with all the big feelings that felt like there was not enough room for. Because we were able to stay present, we noticed all of these moments that felt like magic, and we followed them like breadcrumbs. And, I think something really cool, or at least, at the very least, another visit is going to happen because of it. And I don't know, I feel like my life is better if I view that as magic as opposed to mere coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I'm 100% with you. What do you think, Muttley? Muttley agrees. Yeah. And yeah. Oh my God, he's so cute. Sorry, back to the story. Yes, and I know I was just thinking about when you were talking there, and I thought, you know, so why do this, right? Why see magic? Because we don't have to, right? And I guess there's a couple of things here. One is, I think that when we're born, surely everything seems magical. And we grow because of magic. We grow because of all the things that are triggered inside of us, these little mental synapses that start to work because they are being used, because we are allowing ourselves to be creative. We are allowing ourselves to imagine and to because not everything we see, like a lateral joke, is it lateral, was that they called, like jokes where we see things like this and they say look laterally, see it in a different light. It's like if we could just see around the corner what would be there. And it's it's this thing in life that we don't know everything. And you use the word mystery, beautiful word. So the mystery of things allows us to be creative, to start ting 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 thinking things out and seeing the world in a way that um that is magical, I do believe. And I think that birth is is where that definitely exists. And it's something that maybe we forget to see the wonder of everything as we get older. So it's remembering that and bringing ourselves back into that. Another word you used is being present. And that is when we're born, how present are we? We're there. And it's all like, amazing. So, finding that in each moment. And when we are like that, my question was, why see the magic? Because the magic is the thing that makes everything inside of us come alive and fire. And when it does, it makes more things come alight and fire. And that is a I think that's how we're meant to exist, and what it means to be us, to be human. Um, and I think the word creative I was using before as well. It's almost like, why be creative? Well, why wouldn't we? The joy and the excitement and pleasure and that being here in this moment, experiencing something that makes me come alive is that, and that is magic. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, it all comes back so much to what we're paying attention to, right? And how we're paying attention to it. And I love this reminder that when we're born, I mean, there's things about just, again, kind of science and magic really being two different languages for exploring the same things. When we're born, the way that our brain, the degree to which our brain has developed means that we still experience ourselves as interconnected, right? We haven't differentiated ourselves from our mother's body. We haven't begun to experience ourselves as a sovereign individual. And we are so captivated by whatever is happening in exactly that moment. We're just fully there, just so fully present in that. And we can observe that in babies and infants and toddlers. And at a certain point, they start to differentiate, they start to individuate, they start to be able to kind of hold different points of attention and think about the past and the future. And these are incredibly important capacities to operate in human society. But there's that piece that gets lost as our brain kind of comes into its own. And so much about spiritual practice, I think, is helping us to remember that state of being. And certainly we see language like that all over the system of Reiki, right? The concept of interconnectedness, the idea that there is one life, that we are expressions of that one life that has our own sovereignty, our own way, our own thoughts and feelings and all of that. And at the same time, we're part of a single expression of life. That's something that we actually experience when we're infants. Like, that's just our reality. And so as adults, we have these practices that, give us the opportunity to reach back and to remember that state of being. And then we experience phenomena. We experience a different state of mind, a different feeling in our body, different emotions, different feeling of capacity. We view the world in a different way. We value things differently when we start to feel, experience that sense of interconnection, that sense of non-duality, that everything is present in the moment, and that experience of present centeredness. Even all of the emphasis on compassion that is so present in so many traditions, most traditions of spiritual prominence have some emphasis on compassion. This ability to go back into a state of mind where we haven't forgotten that connection and can therefore, really open our hearts to everything. When we have those experiences as adults, it feels miraculous and it feels like magic and it feels, possibly unlike anything that we could have imagined. And yet, truly, it's just learning to pay attention to something that's already true, right? And the human imagination can turn that into so many things, right? We can create so much incredible, juicy, relationship with these phenomenon through our imagination. I mean, the whole vast world of science fiction fantasy writing is taking phenomena that we can experience and then letting our imagination make meaning of it and create something from it that can be passed on to other people. And a system of practice like Reiki does the same thing. It takes an experience that feels miraculous and passes it on to other people in a form that can be passed. And what is the form? Symbols, words, breath, gesture. And these are the things that we see in fiction that depict magic, right? Magic words, magic symbols, magical gestures, magic wands, right? These are just extensions of things that we can actually experience that our imagination is working with. And when I first started practicing Reiki, I actually just did some writing about this memory for another publication. I grew up reading comic books and, lifelong science fiction fantasy fan. I'm so committed to my fandoms of stories that just really give meaning to my life. And there's one in particular that I found when I was about 7 years old, a particular comic book about elves and magic and witches and all of that. And this story just took up resonance in my psyche so powerfully that it really did shape my worldview and my values. And the main character that I fixated on was a character called Lita, and she was a healer. She could heal with, healing touch. And she was a very mature, motherly, but also kind of sorceress kind of character. And when I was a child, she was like a mother figure to me. And as I grew up, slowly, she became more like somebody I wanted to be like. And when I was in my very first Reiki class and we're learning the hand positions and I'm having this experience, because, you take your first class, and I took a class before I had really had a lot of sessions. I was just like, I heard about it, I was all in. I was like, let's do it. But I hadn't really had a deep personal experience of receiving a Reiki session before until that class. And so I'm having that first experience of feeling energy and feeling that connection. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm Lita. I'm learning to become Lita, like I wanted to be when I was 7 years old, because I was so entranced by the magic of those stories. And then here was like these grown adult people saying, you want to learn how to do that? You can do that, you know? And it was like, yep, magic is real. I always knew it. Looks a little different. I've never like instantaneously healed broken bones by doing Reiki. I'm not averse to the possibility that it could happen, but I have not experienced that the way it showed up in the comic book. But again, we take these things that our imagination makes into, large, wild expressions, and then we have these direct experiences, and it's like, oh, there it is. That's the seed. That's the seed of what our imagination has noticed.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember as a kid sitting there trying to make a cup move, and it didn't work. I haven't found the course yet that's going to teach me how to do that, but I'm still looking. Yeah, but the potential of the moment is it, isn't it? Everything in the potential of the moment, and realizing that, and that's everything that the precepts talk to us about. And this whole thing, like, this is such a lively conversation, right? And this sense of being alive. And if we think about, once again, the precepts, some people think about things like maybe Reiki or meditation as being a very like a neutral and drab thing. Actually, it often has that sort of perspective because it's so quiet and peaceful. But in reality, it's about being alive and everything in us being alive in this moment. When we think about being true to who we are these alive beings with unlimited potential, and finding that potential in every moment is a joy, and it is creative, and it's magical.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking back to some of our past episodes that, kind of touched on some of these. And one of them was our episode on the placebo effect. And, again, synchronicities. So I did two other recordings today for my interview show on YouTube. And both of those interviewees, without my prompting, started talking about synchronicity. And I had been experiencing all this synchronicity the last couple of weeks. I'm like, okay, noticing that. And one of them started talking about the placebo effect as almost like evidence of magic, like, evidence of the way in which our thinking and the way that we focus our attention, what we're focusing our attention on, collaborates with the world to create reality, right? And so, the idea that you can believe that you're receiving a medicine and you can experience some of the benefits of that medicine having not actually received the medicine, right? How that's often used. And I think we talked about this in that episode. If y'all haven't heard it, go back. It was from last year, early last year, I think, maybe even our first year. It's a great episode. And, there's this, like, you hear about the placebo effect often in the context of, some clinical study of some medicine. And the focus of the study is to talk about the effectiveness of the medicine. So they'll say, yeah, we had this, control group that received a placebo, and then we had this other group that received some medicine and another one that received a different medicine. And the emphasis is always on what can we say about the effectiveness of the medicine. But there's often some notation that inside of the placebo group, inside of that control group who did not receive any of the medicine, but were told that they had, or that they might have been, they knew they might have been receiving the medicine, there's some people in that group who experience the benefits of the medicine. And it's like, can we talk about that? Because if you're just writing that off as like, whatever, but like,
whatever,
they didn't receive the medicine and they got the effects of the medicine because of what their mind was doing. Can we talk about that? And, such a powerful example of magic in the form of creating our own experience, our own reality based on what we believe and what we focus our attention on, which
Mm.
is which is wild. You know? Yeah.
It is. And just I don't know if you in that episode I talked about Stephen Michael Mosley's episode. He did a TV show called Placebo where he did do that, and the placebo worked way better than the pills, as such, right? In fact, there
Didn't
were
have it didn't
no
have this bad
pills.
side effects,
There were
right?
no pills, right? So but it was all placebo. But yes, Michael Mosley died, so ballet Mike Mosley. And for me, he did a lot of research that I found really interesting, especially the placebo thing, actually. So a lot of good work in his life, and that is something that you know, I wish for all of us that we get to do something that actually affects the world and helps people to see the world in a better light, in a more magical light.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I haven't got much more to say about this, but have you got anything more you'd like to say, Michaela, before we finish off?
There was one more piece that hopefully I can kind of be a little bit succinct about. When I was again thinking about past episodes, the episode we did recently asking the question, is Reiki love?
Oh yeah.
And we had a great conversation. And I had a bit of a contrary view in that for me, you know, the phenomenon of Reiki is not literally love, but love is a response that happens inside of humans in the face of the phenomenon of Reiki, was how I was distinguishing it. We had a great conversation about that. And so I asked myself the same question, well, is Reiki magic? And is that different than love? And I think I came to kind of a similar idea that like Reiki is Reiki. Reiki is a phenomenon in the world that um, interfaces with the world in a particular way. And then humans perceive it, right? We experience it in whatever way we do, whether because we practiced it ourselves or we're receiving it from someone else, or we just have an experience that we don't even name as Reiki, but it's what it is, we have this moment of feeling absolutely at peace and connected with the life around us, and all of a sudden we feel bigger than ourselves for a moment, and then we snap back to normal reality and are like, whoa, what just happened? That's Reiki. And again, I think I landed at a similar place that like Reiki is what it is, the world is what it is, and when we really pay attention to it in the way that we're discussing here, we perceive it as magic, and therefore it is, right? Because what we're perceiving kind of is our reality. And so I guess in that case, Reiki is love, if that's how we perceive it, because that is our reality.
I was thinking of it in the terms of Reiki as magic, right?
Mhm.
So rather than Reiki is magic, because yeah, I don't know, I think because of what you were saying before, Reiki as magic, and it's all about perception. And um, what do we see as something else, or how do we experience something? And yeah, I think that I don't know if you would say Reiki is magic. It seems mm, it because everyone has a different perspective or a different understanding of what magic is. I think that could be misleading in that sense. Yeah. Um, so really, rather the discussion of Reiki as magic and works for me. Um, yeah.
This is one of the reasons why it can sometimes be really interesting and fun and fascinating to share Reiki with someone who has some sort of fundamental skepticism, right? They have enough willingness and curiosity to come and have a Reiki session or to talk with you about it or to do a meditation. But they're skeptical. They're like, I don't know if this is real. There's nothing that I've experienced that tells me that there's some unseen, invisible energy that's going to make me feel better. But I'm willing, right? And to be able to have an experience from that perspective of, I don't know if this is real at all, but I'm willing, can sometimes open up the most magical experiences because you're not expecting it, but
Absolutely.
it just is. It
Mm.
just is. And then you're like, well, I don't know what that was, but it was something. You know?
I do a lot of treatments
Yeah.
on people who've never had a treatment before. And that is generally the experience. And that people will sit up and they'll go, I don't know how to explain what that is that I just experienced. And they don't have to.
Nope. Yeah. Yeah, and for everybody, and particularly valuable for that person, is the invitation for them to keep noticing what happens throughout the rest of their day. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't qualify that, but in my mind, I'm like looking for synchronicities, noticing our responses to things that might have otherwise been activating for us or stressful. Noticing if we feel more calm, if we feel more connected, if we hear the birds singing a little bit more strongly, but just like whatever that is, just noticing how we are, what our being is like for the rest of the day, to really help to integrate that experience. Because we can have an experience like that and then move on from it and get a little bit of distance and then look back on it and say, that wasn't real. I made that up. Or, I must have fallen asleep and had some weird dream, right? So it's like, hold on to that feeling. Don't let that feeling of magic, that feeling of something unseen, that feeling of something mysterious, don't let it dissipate too quickly. Hold on to it, just notice how you feel, what calls your attention, what people say to you, how you respond to things. Do some journaling, make some art, listen to some music, dance, like somehow be in your body and be in your heart and your mind in a way that's just outside of your normal routine. To just hold on to that feeling of specialness a little bit longer. It's much more likely to stay with you and for you to perceive it as something that you really experienced as opposed to writing it off as I must have just fallen asleep and had a dream, right? Yeah.
I have my own magic and my ideas of things that are magical, and they're solely mine and no one else's, and I think that is sort of what we are talking about here as well. And I'm just going to tell you one of mine just because it's fun. And that is that I always have this idea of birds as messengers, and especially messengers from the dead. Yeah. So when someone dies, I feel, I don't know, I've had a lot of experiences where that sort of synchronicity thing that we were talking about, of birds coming into the building and things like that. So when my mum died, um I have this idea that my mum is a yellow robin. So where I in my house where I look out onto a garden from my bedroom, from the lounge room, and I look out onto this garden, and there's always yellow robins there. And it's such a beautiful thing for me to find that connection for myself in this line of magic that I have created. Because I have created it. It's inside of me and it's something that I have developed. And it's something that supports me and gives me a sense of peace and joy and happiness. And yeah, I love that. And I think that bringing that sense of magic into our lives is a wonderful thing. And we really there's no need for us to put people down for that or to see that in a negative light. I think the only time is if I were to say to you, Michaela, every time you see a yellow robin, that's my mother. Well, it might
Right.
be
It's
like
not your mother to me. I want to, this is so good. I want to track synchronicity and personal magical meaning making in real time based on what you just said, because you chose to tell that particular story. Okay. So you just said that for you, birds are represent messages, and in particular messages from the dead, but like the transmission of messages from unseen places. So there's a particular thing that I want very much in my life, and I've been really spell casting around it and making lifestyle changes around it, like working in the unseen, but also in the seen and logistical sides of life to make this thing happen. And I created an altar for this thing in my bedroom. And, when you're feeling into an altar that represents something kind of ephemeral, like the images that you put on your altar are going to be subjective. They're going to be your own storytelling, that your own meaning. So for whatever reason, the images that came to this altar were two birds. It was a flock of crows and a pair of swans. So that's there. So today, and that I set that up like last week. So today, in that other podcast interview that I keep talking about, where synchronicity and magic was spontaneously the topic, at the end of the interview, we turned off the camera. The person that I was talking to, he's like, I really appreciated the conversation, and I'm feeling, something energetically that I want to tell you, if that's okay. I said, of course. He said, I'm feeling like I need to tell you that birds are messengers for you. There's something that you really want, and the message about it is going to come through birds or feathers. And so I don't know what that means, but I just wanted to tell you. And I was like, oh, my altar with the birds on it. Okay. And then you just said, that was an hour ago. And you just said birds are messengers, right? Now for you, the story is different, right? The yellow robin doesn't mean your mom, but for me, it means something very specific, right? Now my task, so viewers at home, this is, again, we're in real time. We're in real time, like, how do you cast a spell? So my task is to notice that, but not hold on to it too tightly. Because I could go, okay, I got to go get a feather. My chickens are in the backyard. Gonna go get me a feather off the chickens. There we go. There's my magical thing, right? Or I might go through my day and be like, feather, 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 or I'll see a bird and I'll be like, hey, you got a message for me? Like I could strive, I could effort, right, to make that happen, to make this weird thing into something magical. So I got to resist that. Because if this is going to mean anything, and if it's actually going to end up being a way to collaborate with the seen and the unseen places, to maybe influence what's happening in the world, I got to hold it real, real lightly, right? Just for today, I got to not be attached to it. And I just have to be in the practice of noticing.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to do. And I will let you know if anything significant related to birds and this desire of mine happens to manifest.
I feel like when we notice these things, it's like we allow ourselves to sit upon a thread, and the thread is being pulled. And so we're moving with this thread because we're allowing ourselves to be open to these experiences. And where is it taking us? Well, if we try to force that, as you say, it doesn't that's not being in the flow of the universe and not being in the flow of our world. So sitting back into that, but being aware and alive, yeah.
Which is where you started us off, right? That it's about being alive. I think that's a really beautiful place for us to rest.
I think they're starting to work on your yurt. All right. Okay. Well, that was a lovely conversation. Thank you. And I think we should. Oh, I did think of a Shakespearean little comment. What was it? Oh, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And you could say magic is in the eye of the beholder. Yes. So take that with you and see the world in that beautiful, magical light of yours, every single one of you. And we look forward to seeing you next week and hearing about any bird experiences that you might have had along the way, Michaela. Yep.
I will. I'm going to let you know. Friends, let us know about moments of synchronicity that you've had. How do you define magic? How do you find it in the world, or do you find it in the world? Do let us know. What does your Reiki practice teach you about magic? We would love to hear it in the comments down below, and share this episode with somebody who needs a little bit of magic and a little bit of silliness and a little bit of, offbeat quoted Shakespeare in their life. Thank you so much.